He lived a life that many would call ordinary. His days began early, the kind of early that made the world still feel asleep while he moved through it quietly. The small apartment he rented was tidy, but plain. There were a few books stacked in one corner, a worn-out chair, and in the middle of the room, a piano covered with a thin cloth. It was an old piano, its wood scratched and faded. But to him, it held stories, memories, and a quiet comfort that no other possession could replace. From the outside, he could have been anyone. People saw him walk to work, carry a small bag, nod politely to neighbors, and disappear into the rhythm of life. But inside there was always a song playing. It was not a song anyone else could hear. It was the sound of dreams unspoken and emotions that had nowhere else to go. He remembered the first time he had touched the piano as a child. His fingers had hesitated over the keys, unsure but curious. There was no one to teach him, no one to encourage him. He had learned by watching, by feeling, by listening to the music in his heart. Over the years, that piano had become more than wooden strings. It was a friend, a keeper of his secrets. His life was simple, and he liked it that way. Simple routines brought comfort. He liked walking past the quiet cafes in the morning, the smell of fresh bread filling the air. He liked the way sunlight hit the windows of buildings and made patterns on the streets. He liked how people went about their lives, each carrying their stories, unaware of the quiet observer moving among them. Yet, no matter how peaceful his life seemed, there was always a sense of waiting. Something was missing, a door unopened, a moment not yet arrived. Work was mundane. He spent hours in a small office doing tasks that required attention but no real passion. He greeted his co-workers politely, made small talk, and returned home without incident. It was a life that allowed him to exist without drawing attention. Yet inside, the music never stopped. Sometimes he would hum quietly to himself or tap rhythms on the table, imagining the keys beneath his fingers. His heart beat to melodies no one else could hear, rhythms that made him feel alive even when the world around him felt gray. One evening, after another ordinary day, he found himself walking down a familiar street. The city had a rhythm of its own at night. Streetlights cast long shadows. The hum of distant traffic mixed with occasional laughter from people heading home from restaurants and cafes. He noticed a small square he had passed countless times before. In the middle of it stood an old piano, as if waiting for someone to remember it. The sight stirred something inside him. He paused, hesitant, unsure why he felt drawn to it. It was not his piano, not his property, and yet it called to him as if it had known him all his life. For a moment, it just stood there, letting the evening air fill his lungs. He looked around. A few people were scattered in the square, some walking dogs, others chatting quietly. The piano looked unused, dusty, and slightly out of place. It seemed almost magical in the soft glow of the streetlights. He felt a pull he could not explain. It was a feeling he had not experienced in years, not since he had first touched the keys as a child. Curiosity and memory collided inside him, creating a strange urgency that made him move closer. He ran his fingers lightly over the keys. They felt cold, slightly stiff, but familiar in a way that made his heart skip a beat. He tried a simple note, almost cautiously, like testing if the world would notice. The sound rang out softly, delicate but clear. A smile touched his lips almost involuntarily. He tried another note, then a simple sequence. The music felt alive beneath his hands. It was as if the piano remembered him, as if it had waited all this time for someone who could understand it. People walking past slowed down. Some glanced curiously, others kept moving, unaware of the quiet magic unfolding in their midst. He did not care. All that mattered was the connection between his hands and the keys. He played softly, testing the limits, feeling the resonance in his chest. Memories came back, long nights spent practicing in secret, the joy of discovering a melody on his own, the quiet satisfaction of mastering something only through persistence and love. Each note reminded him of a past life he had almost forgotten, a life where music had been everything. The evening deepened. The city lights reflected on wet pavements, and the piano's music carried gently on the wind. He played longer than he intended, lost in a world that was entirely his own. He forgot about the time, about the people around him, even about himself in a way. Each chord, each sequence of notes, was a conversation between him and the piano. He was not performing for anyone. There were no expectations, no pressure. There was only music, pure and simple, flowing naturally from his fingers and into the quiet night. For someone who had always lived in the background, this moment was extraordinary. It reminded him of who he was beneath the ordinary routines, beneath the calm exterior he showed the world. He was more than the office worker, more than the quiet neighbor, more than the man who walked silently down familiar streets. He was a musician, a storyteller, a person capable of creating beauty that could touch others without words. The realization settled gently but firmly in his mind. He could create, he could move, he could be seen in ways he had never allowed himself to be. As he played, noticed a few people stopping to listen. A child clung to a parent, eyes wide, captivated by the sound. An elderly woman paused with her shopping bag, a small smile spreading across her face. A young man leaned against a wall, nodding subtly to the rhythm. The music had begun to weave into the lives of those around him, even though he had not intended it. The piano, the notes, and his hands had created a moment of unexpected connection. It was a small, quiet miracle that required nothing more than his willingness to touch the keys. When he finally stopped, the silence that followed was almost as powerful as the music itself. People looked at him with curiosity, respect, and something resembling awe. He felt a strange mixture of embarrassment and pride. He had not meant to draw attention, and yet here it was. A simple act, a few notes played on an old piano, had created ripples he could not have predicted. He packed his feelings carefully, folding them into the quiet of his heart, and walked away. But the world had changed, even if he did not yet fully understand how. That night, he returned to his small apartment, the memory of the piano still alive in his mind. He sat by his own piano, lifted the cloth, and touched the keys. The connection was immediate, comforting, and stirring. He realized that the evening had reminded him of a truth he had nearly forgotten. Talent and passion do not disappear because life becomes ordinary. They wait patiently for the right moment to be awakened. And sometimes, all it takes is the courage to respond to a small, seemingly simple call. He went to bed that night with a sense of quiet anticipation. The music in his heart was louder than ever, and for the first time in a long time, he felt that something extraordinary was about to begin. He did not know when or how, but he knew the piano, his fingers, and the music would lead him. One simple touch had unlocked memories, feelings, and a potential he had almost forgotten. And though the world outside continued as usual, inside him, something remarkable had started to stir. Quietly, patiently, and with promise. The next day began like any other. He woke to the soft light of morning filtering through his window, the city slowly stirring outside. Yet something inside him felt different. The memory of the piano in the square haunted him, lingering at the edges of his thoughts. He tried to focus on his routine breakfast, getting dressed, leaving for work, but his fingers itched for the keys. The quiet of his apartment seemed almost unbearable. He knew he could not ignore it. Music had called to him, and for the first time in years, felt compelled to answer. He left his apartment earlier than usual and decided to take a different route to work. His steps led him, almost without thinking, toward the small square. The piano still stood there, as if it had been waiting for him. The morning sunlight highlighted its worn edges and chipped paint, but to him, it looked alive. He walked closer, hesitating at the edge of the square, unsure of whether to approach. His heart beat faster. Something told him that today would be different, that today would not be just another ordinary day. As he stood there, a little boy ran past, laughing, chasing after a balloon that had escaped from his mother's hand. The sound made him smile, reminding him of the simple joys that life often overlooked. Then, a voice called from nearby. "Could you play something? Just a little tune?" It was soft, but direct. He turned to see an older woman holding a small cup of coffee. She looked nervous, but hopeful. Her eyes were kind, and for some reason, Her request made him feel exposed. He hesitated, unsure if he wanted anyone to hear him. He had not played in front of anyone in years, not since he had given up hope of ever performing. Yet, something inside him stirred. He approached the piano, the woman stepping back politely to give him space. His hands hovered over the keys, unsure. The world seemed to hold its breath. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Just one simple request, she had said. Just a little tune. He wondered if he had forgotten the skill that had once been so natural. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes for a brief moment, and allowed his fingers to find the keys. The first note rang out softly, almost timidly. It was not perfect, but it was honest. He felt a rush of memories as he played. Each note reminded him of the countless hours he had spent practicing alone, of the quiet satisfaction of discovering a melody that made sense only to him. The music grew more confident as he continued, moving from soft, hesitant notes to a simple, flowing tune. The woman watched silently, a smile forming on her face. The little boy had returned, standing at a distance, captivated by the sound. People began to notice. A young man walking his dog paused, the leash slack in his hand. A couple sitting on a nearby bench turned their heads, curious. The city seemed to slow down around him. The piano, once a forgotten piece of wood in the square, had become a bridge between him and the world. He felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. He had promised himself he would play only a little, that he would not draw attention. But the music had taken over. His fingers moved with a confidence he did not know he still possessed. Weaving a melody that felt both familiar and new, he looked up briefly, noticing the crowd that had gathered. There were smiles, nods of appreciation, and wide eyes of wonder. None of them spoke, yet he could feel their presence, their attention, their quiet encouragement. The simple request that had started it all had transformed into something greater. He realized that music was not just for him. It was a gift meant to be shared, a story waiting to be told through the keys of the piano. And in that moment, he understood that fear and doubt had no place here. Only honesty, only expression, only the music itself mattered. He allowed himself to relax into the melody. It was not perfect, but it was alive. The rhythm carried him forward, and he felt a freedom he had not known in years. The people around him seemed to sense it too. Some closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them. Others whispered softly to each other, amazed by the emotion in the simple tune. The little boy clapped his hands, delighted by the unexpected performance. The woman who had asked for the tune gave him a nod of encouragement, her eyes sparkling with appreciation. In that small square, surrounded by strangers, he felt a connection he had never felt before. Time seemed to stretch and blur. He played longer than he had intended, each note building upon the last, each chord carrying more feeling than the one before. He lost track of the crowd, of the city, of everything but the music. His mind emptied and only the melody remained. It was a rare, sacred moment where the world outside ceased to exist, where the piano and his fingers were all that mattered. He realized that this was not about impressing anyone or seeking validation. It was about truth, about honesty, about sharing a piece of himself without words, as he continued. Memories surfaced, memories of childhood, of the first time he had discovered a complex piece of music on his own, memories of frustration, of tears, of late nights spent practicing until his fingers ached, memories of joy, of triumph, of moments when he had believed in himself even when no one else had. Each memory added depth to his playing, making it richer, more compelling. The crowd could feel it, even if they did not understand the story behind the notes. Emotion has a language of its own, and he was speaking it fluently. When he finally paused, the silence was profound. The city seemed to hold its breath, unwilling to disturb the magic that had filled the square. Then, slowly, applause began. A few hands clapped softly at first, then more joined in, until the entire small crowd erupted in appreciation. He looked up, surprised, almost embarrassed. He had not expected this reaction. He had only intended to play a simple tune to honor the request of a stranger. Yet what had unfolded was something far greater, something that touched the hearts of those around him, The woman who had asked him to play stepped forward again. "That was beautiful," she said simply. Her words, though few, carried warmth and sincerity. The little boy beamed, tugging at his mother's hand as if to say, "Did you hear that? Wasn't it amazing?" Others approached, asking questions, complimenting his skill, and expressing genuine admiration. He smiled politely, answering softly, but inside he felt a mix of emotions he could not yet name. Pride, yes, but also vulnerability, humility, and an unexpected sense of belonging. He left the square that morning with a lightness in his step. Something had shifted within him. The simple request had unlocked more than just a melody. It had awakened a part of himself he had kept hidden for too long. He understood that this was only the beginning. The world had shown him that there was a place for his music, that people could be moved by it, that his gift had meaning beyond his own private enjoyment. Back in his apartment, he sat at his piano again, replaying the tune in his mind and on the keys. Each note felt different now, infused with the memory of the crowd's reaction and the warmth of human connection. He realized that the piano was not just an instrument. It was a bridge, a way to touch others without saying a single word. And for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of purpose, quiet but undeniable understanding that his music mattered. That day, he returned to work with a renewed perspective. The office felt the same, mundane as ever, but inside him something had changed. He carried the melody in his heart, and he found himself humming it quietly, smiling at small moments, noticing things he had overlooked before. Life, he realized, could hold magic even in the most ordinary routines if only one was willing to see it. And all it had taken was a simple request, a small invitation to play, and the courage to answer it. That simple request had opened a door, and he had walked through it, discovering not just his skill, but a deeper understanding of himself and the world around him. The following evening, he could not resist the pull of the piano. Work had been ordinary and uneventful, but every step he took home seemed guided by an invisible thread leading him to the square. The city hummed softly around him, the air carrying the faint scent of coffee, rain-washed streets, and the distant buzz of traffic. The piano waited quietly under the soft glow of the streetlights, almost expectant, as if it had known he would return. He paused at the edge of the square, taking a deep breath. The memory of the previous day's small audience and the simple request played in his mind. He felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This time, he was not just responding to a stranger's question. This time, he was answering something deeper within himself. He walked slowly toward the piano, feeling the cool evening air on his skin, his hands tingling with anticipation. A few people were already lingering in the square, drawn by the faint sound of someone playing earlier, perhaps expecting a tune, or maybe just curious. The moment he lifted the cover off the keys, a hush fell over the immediate area. He could sense the collective breath of the audience, though it was small, waiting for him to begin. His fingers hovered over the keys for a moment longer, and then, almost unconsciously, they began to move. The first notes were soft, delicate, almost hesitant. But as he continued, the hesitation melted away. His fingers flowed over the keys with an ease born of years of quiet practice. Each note resonated with emotion, carrying a depth of feeling that seemed to fill the entire square. He did not play for recognition or applause. He played because he had to, because the music demanded to be heard, because it was a part of him that could no longer be contained. The crowd grew. Quietly, as the music carried through the evening air, people stopped in their tracks, drawn to the sound. Some leaned against walls, others held hands with loved ones, all listening intently. There was a moment when the music became more than melody. It became a language, a story told without words. He could feel the emotions of the listener's curiosity. Nostalgia, joy, and in turn those feelings colored his playing, giving each note a unique resonance. It was a conversation between him and the audience, intimate and unspoken. As the melody grew, he experimented with rhythm and pace, allowing the music to take him to places he had not intended. Notes tumbled into each other, forming complex sequences that felt natural and organic. The piano, old and worn, responded with a richness that surprised even him. The imperfections in the instrument added character, a rawness that deepened the emotional impact of the performance. He lost all sense of time. He could not tell if he had been playing for minutes or an hour. There was only the music, the keys, and the people who had gathered to witness this moment. A few children had come closer, their eyes wide, captivated by the sound. An elderly man leaned on his cane, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Couples and friends stopped their conversations, phones forgotten in pockets, entirely absorbed. He noticed a young woman wiping a tear from her cheek, though he did not know why. The power of music was universal, crossing barriers of age, background, and circumstance. And it was happening right here in this small square, quietly but profoundly as he reached a crescendo. The music became more dynamic, expressive, and powerful. His hands moved faster, with confidence and purpose. Each chord was deliberate, yet flowing, blending control with passion. The audience could feel the energy building, their collective heartbeat almost synchronizing with the rhythm. It was a moment of pure connection, an invisible thread binding performer and listener through shared experience. Some held their breath, as if afraid to interrupt the spell. Then came a pause, brief but striking. The silence was heavy, almost tangible, before he launched into another sequence more intricate than before. He played with nuance, letting soft and loud notes contrast, creating tension and release. He was no longer just playing. He was telling a story, one that only music could convey. Every note seemed to carry a memory, a feeling, a fragment of his life that he had never spoken aloud. And the audience, without words, understood. The square seemed suspended in time. The distant hum of the city faded into the background. The streetlights cast long shadows, dancing lightly over the faces of the listeners. Each person experienced the music in their own way. Some remembered loved ones, some felt joy, others sorrow. He did not see the impact fully. He only felt it, a subtle warmth that surrounded him as he played. The music had become a bridge between himself and everyone present, a silent exchange of emotion and human connection. The melody began to slow, winding down naturally, yet leaving traces of its presence in the air. Each note lingered just a moment longer, as if reluctant to leave. When he finally finished, the square was quiet for a heartbeat, as if no one dared to break the spell. Then, applause erupted, gentle at first, then building steadily. The people around him clapped, some whistled softly, others nodded in awe. The sound of appreciation was overwhelming, but not in a way that distracted him. It was a recognition, a validation of something he had always known within himself, but had never dared to show. He looked around, finally seeing the faces of those who had stopped to listen. There were smiles, tears, expressions of wonder and surprise. A few people approached, wanting to speak, to compliment, to understand. He responded with quiet gratitude, feeling a mix of humility and pride. It was not the attention that mattered. It was the connection. The proof that music could reach people in ways words could not. The woman who had asked for a simple tune the day before stood near the edge of the crowd, her eyes shining. "I had no idea," she whispered. "It's beautiful." Her words were simple, yet they carried the weight of honesty and emotion. He nodded, smiling faintly, feeling an unspoken acknowledgement that he had finally embraced a part of himself that had been dormant for far too long. That night, walking home, he felt different. The world seemed more alive, more full of possibility. He realized that the music inside him was not just a hobby or a memory. It was a part of his identity, an essential element of who he was. And the piano, once a silent witness to his life, had become a voice through which he could share his inner world with others. He understood now that talent was not measured solely by perfection, but by the courage to express oneself fully, honestly and without fear. Back in his apartment, he sat at his own piano, replaying the tunes from the evening. Each note echoed with the memory of the audience, the street, and the connection that had formed. He felt a sense of liberation, as if a door had been unlocked within him, a door leading to a life richer than he had imagined. The music had shown him something profound, that true expression could touch others deeply, sometimes in ways that could not be explained, only felt. He played late into the night, allowing the melodies to flow freely, unbound by structure or expectation. Every note was a statement, a confession, a story. The piano became an extension of his heart, a channel through which emotion and experience could pass unfiltered. And though the city outside remained quiet, his world had expanded infinitely. He knew that tomorrow and the days after, the music would continue to guide him, revealing new layers of talent, new opportunities, and new connections. He finally rested, leaving his fingers on the keys for a moment longer, feeling the lingering vibration of the last chord. The memory of the evening's performance stayed with him, a reminder of what could happen when one allowed oneself to be vulnerable, to respond to a simple request, and to trust in the power of their gift. The piano, the music, and the connection had awakened something permanent inside him. Recognition of his own worth, the value of expression, and the transformative power of sharing one's talents with the world. The morning after his unforgettable performance, he woke with the memory of the music still vivid in his mind. The notes, the rhythm, expressions on the faces of the listeners, everything played again and again, like a film he could not turn off. He had expected life to return to normal, to be the quiet routine he had known for years. But something inside him had shifted. The music had awakened not only his passion, but also a sense of courage he had long forgotten. It was no longer a secret he could keep. As he walked through the streets that morning, he noticed subtle changes. People looked at him differently, not with recognition exactly, but with a quiet curiosity. Some had seen the small crowd, some had heard the faint echo of music drifting from the square, and even those who had not witnessed it seemed to sense something different in him. The city itself seemed warmer, more vibrant, as if it acknowledged the transformation that had begun inside him. He felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The world he had known so well now seemed full of possibilities he had never considered. Later that day, he returned to the square, not to perform again, but to observe. The piano stood quietly, familiar and yet distant, as if it too had absorbed the echoes of the previous night. He ran his fingers lightly over the keys, remembering the emotions, the energy, and the connection that had filled the space. The memories brought a smile to his face. He had discovered something powerful, something that went beyond skill. It was the ability to move people, to create an experience that touched hearts in ways words could never capture. A few passers-by recognized him this time. They smiled, nodded, or whispered a greeting. One man, who had been part of the audience the night before, approached hesitantly. "That was incredible," he said. "Do you perform often?" The question caught him off guard. He shook his head quietly, unsure of how to explain the years of practice, the hidden talent, the fear of sharing it. He realized that the truth was complex and deeply personal. His music had been a private world, a refuge from the demands of everyday life, and exposing it to others was both thrilling and terrifying. Despite the hesitation, he felt a growing sense of responsibility. The music he had kept to himself had the power to inspire, to comfort, and to connect. He could no longer ignore it. He thought about the simple request that had started it, all a casual question from a stranger that had led to this revelation. It amazed him how one small act, one simple invitation, could change the course of a life. The idea settled in his mind like a seed. Perhaps his music could be shared more intentionally, not just in fleeting moments, but in ways that reached more people, touched more hearts, and left a lasting impact. As the day progressed, he continued to reflect on his journey. Memories of his childhood lessons, the long nights of self-practice, the moments of doubt and frustration, all of it now made sense in a new light. He realized that his quiet persistence had not been in vain. Each struggle, each moment of solitude at the piano, had prepared him for this moment of revelation. The public response was not just recognition of talent. It was acknowledgement of years of dedication, discipline, and silent devotion to his craft. He felt a swell of pride, tempered by humility, understanding that the gift he had carried quietly for so long was finally being recognized, not for fame or acclaim, but for the joy it brought to others. The evening brought another visit to the square. This time, the crowd had grown larger, drawn by word of mouth, and the lingering excitement of the previous night. He approached the piano cautiously, aware of the eyes on him. Yet unlike before, there was no fear, only a deep, calm resolve. He lifted the cover, placed his fingers on the keys, and let the music flow. It was different now, infused with awareness of the audience and the responsibility of sharing his gift. The melody was richer, more expressive, and layered with emotion. Every note seemed to resonate with the people listening, creating a bridge between his inner world and theirs as he played. A few individuals approached, asking questions about his background, about how he had learned to play and why he had kept his talent hidden for so long. He spoke softly, revealing fragments of his story, the childhood fascination with the piano, the years of practice in solitude, the fear of exposing himself to judgment, and the simple joy of creating music that mattered to him. The listeners were captivated not just by the performance, but by the honesty of his words, the vulnerability behind the music. They realized that this was not just a display of skill. It was a testament to perseverance, courage, and the human spirit. Among the crowd, he noticed a few young musicians, their eyes wide with admiration. He felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that his performance might inspire them, that it could awaken the same passion and dedication he had nurtured in secret for so many years. It occurred to him that talent, when hidden, is like a dormant seed. It waits for the right conditions, the right encouragement, and the right moment to grow. The simple request that had started this journey had been that catalyst, and now the results were blossoming before him, not just in applause, but in the smiles, curiosity, and wonder of those who listened. As the performance drew to a close, the applause was overwhelming. People were moved, some visibly, others silently. He felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that the music had touched them in ways he could not have imagined. Yet, amid the recognition, he remained humble, understanding that the journey was ongoing. The piano, the music, and the connection with others were a living, breathing experience that required continued dedication and openness. It was not a one-time revelation, but the beginning of a new chapter in his life. After the crowd dispersed, he sat alone for a moment, fingers lingering on the keys. The quiet of the square was comforting, a contrast to the energy of the audience. He reflected on the journey that had brought him here, the years of private practice, the moments of doubt and self-questioning, and the small, seemingly insignificant request that had changed everything. He realized that life often presents opportunities in subtle ways, disguised as ordinary moments. Recognizing them requires awareness, courage, and the willingness to act, even when fear whispers that it is easier to remain hidden. As he walked home that night, the city lights shimmered on wet streets, reflecting the quiet glow of possibility. He felt a profound sense of gratitude for the piano, for the people who had listened, for the moments that had revealed his talent to the world. He understood now that music was not just a personal refuge. It was a bridge to others, a language that transcended words, culture, and circumstance. And the power of a single simple request had unlocked not only his music, but also a deeper understanding of human connection and potential. In the days that followed, he continued to practice, explore new melodies, and occasionally returned to the square. Each visit, each performance revealed more of his ability and more of the impact his music could have. He was no longer the man who had quietly lived a simple life. He had become a conduit for expression, a reminder that hidden talents, when nurtured and shared, could transform not only the life of the performer, but also the lives of those who witnessed it. The truth of his journey was clear. Sometimes, a single request, a small act of curiosity or encouragement, can ignite a spark that changes everything, revealing the beauty, depth, and power that have always existed within. The days following his public performances were different from anything he had ever experienced. The world seemed larger, more inviting, yet somehow quieter at the same time, as if it had taken a pause to watch him unfold his talent. People he met on the street smiled differently, some recognizing him, some just sensing a shift in the calm, quiet confidence he carried. Inside, he felt a lightness, a sense of purpose that had been missing for years. The piano had become not just an instrument, but a part of his identity, a key to expressing himself and connecting with the world in ways he had never imagined. He returned to his apartment each night and sat at his own piano,
Aus.
letting the melodies flow freely. These sessions were private, not for anyone else's ears, but they felt different, now full of life, full of possibility. He explored new sounds, combining chords and rhythms in ways he had never dared before. The music grew bolder, more expressive, and with every note he felt a deeper connection to his own spirit. He realized that the world outside was no longer the only place he existed. The music created its own world, one he could share freely without fear. One morning, he received a message on his phone. It was from someone who had been in the crowd, a small invitation to play at a local community event. The idea of performing formally was still intimidating, but he felt ready. He remembered the simple request that had started all this, the spark that had awakened his music in the first place. With a calm determination, he agreed. The thought of playing for an audience again filled him with a mix of nerves and excitement. Yet, there was no fear, only anticipation, and the promise of sharing his gift once more. The day of the event arrived. He walked onto the small stage, carrying with him the quiet confidence that had been nurtured over years of solitude and practice. The audience was diverse families, elderly couples, young children, and curious passersby who had heard whispers of the piano that could move hearts. As he sat down, he felt a sense of calm wash over him. This was not about proving himself. It was about communicating through music, telling a story without words, and creating a shared experience that would touch each person in the audience. His fingers found the keys with ease. The first notes were soft, gentle, and exploratory. Then, as the music continued, it became more intricate, more expressive, and more powerful. Every note carried the essence of his journey, the quiet dedication, the hidden practice, the moments of doubt and triumph. The audience felt it too. They leaned forward, listening intently, some closing their eyes to absorb the emotion, others moving subtly to the rhythm. The performance was not perfect in a technical sense, but it was honest, raw, and deeply moving as he played. He noticed a few familiar faces from the square, people who had encouraged him, who had believed in the power of his music before he fully believed himself. Their presence grounded him, reminding him that the journey was shared, that music was a bridge connecting hearts, and that the impact of his gift extended beyond his own understanding. The melodies became richer, weaving together elements of joy, sorrow, hope, and nostalgia. Creating a tapestry that seemed to speak directly to the human experience, the climax of his performance was breathtaking. The notes rose and fell, creating waves of sound that carried through the venue. People were captivated, some whispering to each other, some holding their breath, all experiencing the music in their own unique way. He felt a deep connection with every listener, aware that each note was reaching them differently, but that the music united them in shared emotion. It was a profound realization of the power of expression, of vulnerability, and of the courage to share something deeply personal with the world. When the final note lingered and faded into silence, the audience erupted in applause. The room filled with clapping whistles and expressions of awe. He looked around, smiling humbly, feeling gratitude for the opportunity to share his music and for the people who had embraced it. Some approached to speak with him, sharing how the music had moved them, inspired them, or reminded them of something long forgotten. Each interaction reinforced the understanding that his music had value beyond personal satisfaction. It could touch lives, spark emotions, and create lasting impressions. In the days that followed, more invitations arrived. Schools, community centers, and small events asked him to perform, to share his music with those who might not otherwise experience it. He accepted selectively, guided by intuition and the desire to make a genuine connection, rather than chasing fame or recognition. Each performance became an opportunity to give, to communicate, and to inspire. The simple request from a stranger had set in motion a journey that was now larger than himself, a journey that was shaping not only his life, but the lives of those who listened. He continued to practice daily, exploring new pieces, composing original melodies, and refining his skill. Yet the music was never about perfection. It was about honesty, emotion, and the willingness to be vulnerable. He discovered that the greatest impact came not from technical mastery alone, but from authenticity and connection. The piano, once a quiet companion in solitude, had become a conduit for expression, storytelling, and shared humanity. With each passing day, he grew more confident in his abilities and more aware of the potential his music held. He realized that life often presents opportunities in unexpected ways, and that courage sometimes begins with a simple action. A small request, a fleeting moment of curiosity from a stranger, had led to this transformation. The music that had once been hidden in his apartment and in the quiet of the square was now a living force, reaching into the hearts of many and inspiring others to embrace their own talents and passions. As months passed, he continued to perform in public spaces and intimate gatherings. The joy of sharing music became a core part of his identity, and he embraced it fully. Yet, he remained grounded, remembering the years of quiet practice, the solitude, and the fear that had once held him back. These memories reminded him that the journey was ongoing, that growth required patience, humility, and dedication. He carried the lessons of the past forward, using them to enrich his performances and to connect with audiences in meaningful ways. One evening, after a particularly moving performance in the square, he sat quietly at the piano as the crowd dispersed. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of rain on the streets. He reflected on the journey from the first hesitant touch of the keys as a child to the moment a stranger's simple request had unlocked a path to sharing his music with the world. He understood now that talent is not just a gift to be kept. It is a responsibility to nurture, to express, and to share. The true beauty of music lies in its ability to connect, to heal, and to inspire. Sitting there, with his fingers resting lightly on the keys, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He had discovered not only his own voice but also the power of responding to life's subtle invitations. The piano had become more than an instrument. It was a bridge to the world, a way to touch hearts and create moments of beauty that would linger long after the music had ended. And the simple request that had started it all remained a symbol of how one small act can spark a transformation that changes everything.